I am disappointed. I'm not angry, BBC. I'm just disappointed.
You are free to kick us off with episode 4 follow-up.
Well, it would be me starting this, wouldn't it? We've been sent video evidence of Foxic winning a fight. So in episode 3, I believe it was, I talked about the fact that I've never seen Foxic win a fight. You said that you couldn't find the video. Someone on the Robot War subreddit has found us a video of Foxic 3, both using its weapon and winning a fight, which is quite very impressive.
This should feel like more of a victory for me than it does. Because we say winning. It was more a question of the opponent lost. It wasn't the dominant performance I would like to see from Foxic.
Oh, I should have watched this just before we started, but
Watch it now and do live commentary.
we're doing it live.
Okay, so the thing it's up against appears to be a toy car with a bump around it. That's the first thing I'm seeing. And there's High Five in there, which I think is using its live tour name of Hansi. So already, it's not a stellar lineup of opponents. We've got a grabber lifter thing, and we've got another slow lifter. Think sort of first version of Vercingetorix level lifter.
I mean, for me, this shows that Foxic is a much better live touring robot than it is a television robot.
I'm not sure I agree with that. I think that the design of Foxic would really come into its own when it's having to go up against big spinners. Whereas in the live tour, where there's quite a lot of good flippers, which just happen to not be in this fight, I see it struggling more in that environment than in the higher damage environment. It's been built to be tanky, it's been built to survive things, and that attribute isn't being used on the live tour.
I'd argue it's not being used on television either.
Well, so far, no, it hasn't. Unfortunately, we've not seen it. Or in robo games even, because it didn't get shipped properly.
Oh my goodness me.
This whole fight, it's a victory, but it's not impressive. If anything, by seeing it win, it's proved your point as much as mine.
So I feel like High Five was just kind of stopped moving at this point. So it's just Foxic versus whatever this other robot was called.
Cyberraptor, which is not the design I would have associated with that line of names just from BattleBots.
No.
You know, there's been Alpha Raptor and other Raptor things. I want to say Beta Raptor, potentially.
Who knows? Foxic had just successfully flipped that robot. Oh, and High Five is back to moving.
You know, we moan a lot about Jonathan Pierce, but this is harder than it looks. Mainly because there is nothing happening.
Well, you say that. I mean, Foxic has just driven High Five across the arena. So, right, this is why... Right. So, Foxic and High Five are now both in the pit. And apparently Foxic have won.
Considering the level of rules tombuggery we're used to, that's not that bad.
I feel like we saw something like this in the television show as well, where I feel like they both ended up in the pit.
That was a heavy metal fight, I seem to recall, and to be fair, they did demonstrably go in second.
In this case, I think that Foxic went in first, but it was sort of like their doing that brought them both in because High Five was on top of Foxic. I don't know. I wouldn't call it a win, personally. I also realised how stupid it was now that I said I didn't know what the other robot was called because obviously it's in the title of the video.
No, this is one of those things. Obviously, I'd like to take the mick out of you for your dislike of Foxic. I do think that you are, broadly speaking, wrong to dismiss it as much as you do. But this hasn't helped my case as much as I would like.
No, I mean, it's impressive to see the weapon work. Like, I feel like I've got a much better idea of what it does now. In my mind, the only bit that ever moved was the head bit. I imagined it'd be a much smaller flipper, but now that I've seen it, it's obviously the whole back spine of the robot that moves. It is more impressive than I thought it would be. But, I mean, we got to see it move on TV, man.
I think the reason you've got that impression is from the old version.
Yeah, quite possibly.
So you have to imagine there being a sort of attachment point for the weapon. And then the robot can almost be run forwards or backwards.
Yeah.
So you either have a long arm with the head on one end and call that forwards.
Ah, okay.
Or you have it just attached straight at that attachment point, so it's a much smaller movement, and drive it that way round.
Yeah, I see.
If that made any sense as a set of words, which I'm not sure it did.
Yep, I understand.
Designs like Foxic, I really think we need, and we're especially going to need them as the series go on, because we're getting more and more big, powerful spinners. And it's robots like Foxic that are going to be able to give them some trouble. So even though it hasn't come into its own yet, I hope it sticks around just for when it does work. So I think it will really worry a lot of opponents.
By that reasoning, you're arguing for more cherubs as well.
It may seem like that, but for reasons it's not. But I mean, that is genuinely one of the many hypocrisies of my way of thinking about this. The difference between the two is that Foxic has some offensive attributes. You know, it is quick, it does have an effective lifter. If Cherub, upgraded the motors, put a better weapon on it, I wouldn't mind it as much. So I think that is all of it for episode 4, isn't it? Or did you want to take a look at some other stuff with this fight?
We got some follow-up on episode 5 about welding aluminium.
I'll TLDR this. I was right, it's difficult.
Yeah, that's what I thought as well. What I didn't know, actually, is that grinding it is quite dangerous, though. So this guy's talking about what happens if you start trying to grind down the welds on aluminium. Because aluminium is such a soft metal, it will build up unevenly on your grinding disc, and then it's weighted weirdly, and then it might shatter, which is not what you want.
That's the last thing you want when dealing with anything that spins quickly.
I don't know, man. If you just do it in a school in a school classroom with children in it, then surely it's fine.
Don't remind me of that. Now, again, this is the kind of thing that I do love learning from this. We're coming into a lot of this without necessarily the background knowledge. We've made an assumption, it turned out to be right. If it had been wrong, we'd have also found out. This is the joy of doing this podcast.
Indeed.
Always happy to be told we're wrong, but way happier to be told we're right.
Oh, yes.
The rest of the follow-up we had, or the rest of the feedback we had, the rest of the follow-up we have, is about the original lineup of that episode and the changes that were made.
Yeah.
It gets complicated.
Walk us through it, Ryan.
So, it was mentioned that Rusty was a reserve, which is a good explanation of why they hadn't necessarily tested as much as we might like.
As much as we might like? Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah, not as much as we would have liked. I then dug back through some threads and found a very good explanation of how the sort of heat lineup changed over the course of the filming from Jamie from the Coyote team. Here's what I believe has happened based on that and a few other things. It seems as though the original lineup was as follows. One of the melees would have been Coyote, Apollo, Miss Nightshade, Crackers and Smash. The other would have been Carbide, Cranky, Glitter Bomb, and a robot called Point Break that we haven't seen before. It seems that Cranky got moved into what ended up being Heat A, the Aftershock Heat. That was a straight swap for Trolley Rage. Glitter Bomb has withdrawn and been replaced with Mega Mouse. And Point Break has withdrawn and been replaced by Rusty.
Do we know why these guys withdrew?
I think Point Break possibly didn't pass tech check. Glitter Bomb, I think, just had problems.
Fair enough.
Thing is, I feel there is another robot that possibly was in and straight out in between all of this that I've missed. So if anyone out there knows what that was, I would love some clarification. Because this has taken far too long for me to work out already. So those are the changes, and that's then meant a bit of rearrangement as well. So one of the melees has ended up being Coyote, Apollo, Miss Nightshade, and then Rusty has been switched with Crackers and Smash, which leaves Carbide, Trolley Rage, Mega Mouse, and Crackers and Smash in the other one.
Yeah.
So out of the original lineup for this melee, 3 have been replaced, or changed, or whatever, which does go quite a long way to explaining the real lack of balance within it. And when I look at the way they have moved stuff around in the melees, they've got about as good a range as they were going to, by the looks of it. Even if the sort of Coyote, Apollo, Miss Nightshade, Rusty is maybe a slightly weaker one.
I mean, that whole episode was weak, really.
I don't want to rehash anything that I've said already, but the messing around with it made it worse.
Yeah.
The idea of let's put Apollo and Carbide together made it worse.
Yeah, definitely.
It made for 1 or 2 good fights between them, and everything else was just filler.
Yeah, and ultimately, I mean, the fights between Apollo and Carbide are only exciting because of their history. I feel like the fights themselves, nothing to write home about.
For me, the good thing about an Apollo Carbide fight is that Apollo is one of the designs that has a better chance of beating Carbide. There aren't many machines in the competition that you look at and go, yeah, they could give them some trouble. So having them together here is fine, but the whole idea is that that should be happening in the final anyway. The best robots should get through, and they should all be at least some level of problem to each other. It's not silly, it's just conceited to have forced that early.
Yeah, well, the BBC have done what they've done, and there's nothing we can do to change it, other than hope that they do better in Series 10. Have you got any more follow-up?
The last thing I want to do is go back for what I hope is a final shot at this whole engineering debate that we have. Specifically with Jellyfish, with a few others as well.
Okay, then.
Because this is a conversation that I actually had with a few people at work in the last few weeks.
Okay.
I was working with a set of new people. A few of them were engineering students or engineering graduates.
Okay.
So I put to them this idea of, what does it mean to be an engineer? And what I found was that no one could answer that question. So I'm really interested to know, and I'm worried we've done this before, but we'll go through it again anyway. What is your definition of an engineer?
Well, I guess the really short answer is that the Jellyfish team are engineers, because, do I mean that? I would call them engineers. If they don't want to identify as engineers, then so be it. But, building a robot is engineering as far as I'm concerned. But I don't know, I feel like engineering is just a fairly, for me, it's a fairly loose, nebulous term. I don't try to strictly define it so much. It was more the principle of claiming that because they're not engineers, or we've been over this so many times. It was just the fact that they claimed that not being an engineer gave them an advantage. That's what bothered me.
So you're kind of viewing the idea of engineering as the verb rather than the noun of a specific qualification.
Yeah, I mean, like, if they haven't got an engineering degree or some kind of certification, then, maybe it's valid to say that they're not engineers. I mean, if you go with the noun thing of that, but I don't know. Like I said, building a robot is engineering, and I think if you've got training in engineering, you're going to do a better job of it than if you haven't. Generally speaking, obviously, some people will do very well without a qualification in engineering, but generally speaking, if you've been through some kind of training and certification, then you're going to be better at it than someone who hasn't.
But then you look at what's been done, and I'm talking specifically with Jellyfish now. How much of that is stuff that you would learn while training as an engineer?
You probably wouldn't learn very many of the specifics, but you'd learn about the ideas and the thought processes that go into doing this kind of thing. I mean, that's sort of what it is. I mean, ultimately, I feel like, for me, I think being an engineer is just the way that your brain works. Sometimes you'll think in terms of things of just a certain approach to problem solving, and if your approach to problem solving is pay someone else to do it, then you're probably not an engineer. But if your approach to problem solving is, let's go figure out how all this works and see if I can, put something together, then that's engineering,
When you say that, I hear this idea of engineering as a mindset.
Yeah.
And that makes me think, well, actually, that's something that's not taught. And there's an argument to be made, and I don't know if I believe it or not, that education can stifle creativity. And that if engineering is a mindset and a set of attitudes, they could almost be taught out of you in a way.
There's a balance with all these things. So there is value to having formal training in engineering, because there are classes of problems that you can consider solved problems. And if you continually try to resolve solved problems, you're just wasting a lot of time. There are commonly accepted, like, best practices, if you will, for how to do certain things, and that's something that you gain through a formal education. I mean, that might be a degree, it might be some postgraduate work, it might just be some course that you attend to in the evenings, or whatever. I don't know. It's not really important, but I feel like if you go and do training, or just immerse yourself in whatever element of engineering you want. I mean, for me, most of my experience is now, at this point in my life, is in software engineering, and there's a whole debate around whether or not that's considered engineering or not. But for my purposes, it is. And I mean, in that industry, we use design patterns. So there's lots of things that are solved, and you might go, okay, well, I've got this particular problem, and I happen to know that this problem has been solved before and it was solved using a state machine, for example, and therefore I'm just going to, my first attempt is going to be to use a state machine. Now, it may be that you spend a day implementing a state machine for this thing, and then you realize that actually that's not quite the right shape you need. You need to back out and do something else. But having that background knowledge enables you to make intelligent sort of first steps towards something, and a lot of the time they'll be the right steps to be making. So you're progressing a lot faster. Whereas if you did no research into building a robot and then just thought, well, I'm just going to have a go at doing it, and I'm going to do it from whatever knowledge I have, it's going to take you a long time, if nothing else. And my prediction is that the resulting thing would not be a very good fighting robot, but maybe it would be. Some people are very good.
I suppose the way I see it is that if you have a set of skills and a set of knowledge, you are probably less likely to fail, which means that you are more likely to succeed. But I wonder if there's... I'm being too sort of cautious about the way I'm putting this across, I suppose. I wonder if not having that experience and not being almost bounded by that experience just gives you that opportunity to come up with something absolutely incredible out of left field that the so-called engineers wouldn't bother looking at in the first place. And although it wasn't successful, I kind of see jellyfish as that. It's an idea out of left field. It isn't one of the stock recognised solutions to the problem of fighting robots. It's completely different, and it could potentially have been amazing. The fact it wasn't is not an excuse.
I think you are sort of assuming that by going down like a formal training route that you lose all imagination and creativity. But I feel like both of those things, this idea of having imagination and having creativity, are things that you can learn and that they are things that you can practice at. There's a really fantastic talk, which I will really try to remember to put in the show notes, by John Cleese, I think, about playing and what that means and how you can use playing to do things. But the basic idea is that you don't just necessarily run with the first solution you come up with. You sort of look at it, play with it for a bit, and then just set it aside and just keep going and just keep sort of like finding different approaches to solve the problem. And this will result in very creative and very imaginative solutions if you leave it long enough. I mean, if you just run and gun and go, right, I've come up with one idea and I'm just going to see that through to the end, then that's one way of approaching this. But you can also take a minute to just sort of try a few things and then just try another one just to see. Even if the one you currently have is perfectly good, then play around, try something else as well, and it might be better, it might be worse, it might just be different. You don't know. And this is another thing that I do a lot when writing software and stuff is I'll create a branch, I'll start working in it, and I'll go over it, I'll look over it with a few other people, and then we might decide actually this probably isn't the right way to do this. So I'll save all that work just in case, but then I'll go and create a different branch, and I'll try a different approach to these things. And if you give yourself time to just sort of stop and think and not try to push yourself to do things, it may be that you need to just sort of sit in a quiet room for an hour and just sort of think and let your brain just go mad. It may be I often come up with good ideas when I'm just out walking and I'm not really engaged my brain and stuff. And I think this is, like I said, this is a skill that can be learned, I think. And maybe, I mean, this isn't particularly taught in schools and stuff, but you can learn it, and you can still have you can be a very rigorous engineer and still have very, very creative ideas.
As you were saying that, I was kind of challenging myself to look back through the field and try to find something that would sort of fall under the bracket of built by engineers that is a, let's say, more creative approach to the problem of Robot Wars. And I suppose the one that I'm finding is PP3D. In terms of, we have a couple of effective bar spinners. That, at this point, is a fairly standard solution to the problem of Robot Wars.
Yeah.
We've got flippers, another very standard solution. Maybe there are details in the execution, but that's pretty normal by now. Drums, I suppose, are the up-and-coming solution almost. Although if you look through sort of lightweights, featherweights, beetleweights and that, maybe a little more common. Can you think of any others that are sort of out there that have either done well or shown the potential to do well from proper engineers, as it were?
Well, I have the disadvantage of not knowing the teams as well as you do.
True.
Well, I don't know. Ian Lewis and Simon Scott are apparently industrial designers. I don't know how close that is for you, but I mean, they do amazing stuff. Some pretty solid engineering goes into that as well.
Yeah, and I suppose when Razer first came around, that was, again, completely groundbreaking.
Yeah, but I was thinking more of Warhead as a more modern thing, which is just so mental compared to all the other robots. And I guess I don't know that you necessarily consider their careers as technically engineering or not, but
I would have happily put them in that area. Yeah.
I would happily call all of them pretty solid engineers.
I suppose what I'm looking at with them is that their day job involves a lot of the skills that their hobby involves.
Yeah.
They are doing machining work and design work or something like that, which is why I picked PP3D. Works with 3D printing and machining.
So yeah, I mean, I would go with that. I mean, I think Razer to an extent, but definitely Warhead is so different to any other robot that I've seen.
But is it functionally that different? It is a flywheel essentially. That is the main weapon part. Obviously, the body design is a lot more interesting. I think they've gone for a less competitive design to have a more interesting design, which, funnily enough, I quite like. In a shock to the world. But I wouldn't say it's necessarily out there as a solution to a problem. As a design, maybe, but not as a solution. Well, it's still basically, let's deliver a big hit by spinning a heavy thing and smacking it against someone else.
I mean, I don't know what you're looking for. I'd make the same argument about PP3D. It's just a big spinning wheel. The only difference is that it's on the floor. Is that the world's most creative and out there idea?
Yeah, that to me is just enough. It's still kind of tenuous, I suppose. I suppose the other thing with this is that perhaps the way the tournament is set up and run kind of discourages risk-taking to a certain extent, because people are putting a lot of money into this. They want to be successful. They want to get accepted. They're having to build it in quite a tight time frame. So I suppose all of that maybe just meters ambitions in terms of doing something creative. Obviously, we still have those designs out there. I think there's a lot that specifically do things with the aesthetics. But I wonder if that's just another reason not to innovate.
This is my next question: is what are you looking for when you're asking for creative things? Are you asking for creative weaponry or like creative designs? And creative weaponry is unlikely to win. I mean, there's a very good reason why the most effective robots are either flippers or spinners. Like these are designed, or these are weapon types that are proven to work. And there's only so many ways you can approach that type. If you're going to have a weapon or a robot where your weapon type is a spinner, there's not a huge amount of scope for creative solutions, right? I mean, you could put it at some wacky 45-degree angle just for the sake of innovating, but then you're going to have gyroscopic problems that are so much worse than having a horizontal or a vertical one. They're so much harder to manage if you put them at an angle. Or you can change the placement. I mean, you can go PP3D, have it really low. You can do a carbide or tombstone, have it in the middle. You could go like Ironside 3 and have it on top of you and at a slight angle. I mean, you can do a bunch of stuff with it, and these are all different solutions with the same kind of weapon type, but you're not going to get something that's fundamentally different and still considered a spinner. There's limited things here, and if you want to build a robot that can win or do well, you've got to have a weapon that's effective. And I feel like the range of effective weapons is probably quite narrow. And it may be that someone comes up with something so far out of left field or whatever that's so different that maybe they'd win. But that seems immensely unlikely. I mean, people think that Apple are going to do this. There was so much like anticipation and hype when Apple were like going to talk about their iPad or whatever, and they thought, what kind of how are they going to solve the problem of an on-screen keyboard, or I think with their phone, or how are they going to deal with the keyboard? And what they did is exactly what you'd expect, which is just scale up the iPhone, and that was it. And it's sort of like, what else are they going to do? Like even a company that's often considered unjustifiably often to be this fantastic innovator, just sort of like. Often the correct thing is just exactly what you'd expect, and I feel like the same is going to be true in this. Is the best solutions that if you've got the problem of winning robot wars, the best solutions are flipper or spinner at this point. There's not much else you can do that's going to win, other than clever creative solutions that still fundamentally result in something that looks from the outside like the same thing. Now it may be that a grappler, which is not a new idea, could be made to work if you can come up with some crazy way to put a lot of force in there. If you could come up with an improvement to Razer, for example, where you're properly putting pressure on them. If you can come up with a way to have that both actuate quickly and deliver enough force to penetrate hardox, for example, then that's going to be a really good solution. Now, I feel like when you just first look at that, you're going to argue, well, that's not a creative or inventive solution because we've seen grapplers, we've seen Razor, we've seen all these things before. But then if they've got something like inside that's creative or different, and I mean creative in terms of engineering problem solving, in terms of a different, not the kind of like artsy fartsy creativity, but creative solutions to real problems. And you're not necessarily going to see that, but they're going to have a very effective robot. And that's the kind of creativity I think that I would look for, and that's the kind of creativity that I was saying can be learned. Whereas like how to have a robot that's got design flair and stuff is probably harder to learn, still doable, but also much less relevant to actually winning the tournament. I mean, you'll get a lot of love for having a really well designed robot. Like I love Razor primarily because of the way they look. I love Warhead for the same reason. But something like Carbide is a more effective robot.
That's all really reasonable, and I do have to recognise that what I'm looking for here does completely disregard that less visible innovation in terms of, okay, let's solve one of the smaller problems involved in applying our large-scale solution.
Yeah.
Differently, having a creative approach to that, I'm not necessarily sort of accounting for here. I feel like I do when we're looking at individuals. When I'm looking at the whole, I suppose I do have a slightly superficial tilt at that argument, as it were. Mostly because I want to defend Jellyfish.
I think you've just got to accept that Jellyfish is not a good robot. Like, I don't know. I honestly don't know what it is you love about that robot so much. There are other robots that I feel do what I think you like about Jellyfish far, far better. Other beginner teams doing slightly different things that are far more effective than Jellyfish ever was. And it's just, I don't get your love for that robot.
There are lots of things in its favour. One, I really like Dave Laurie. So I'm already going to have a bias towards it.
I just want to be clear, by the way, I have no problem with Dave Laurie. He seems like a very nice guy.
Yeah, I really love him as a builder. I like the fact it would be very easy to underestimate, or in your opinion, just estimate, I suppose. I'm not actually that sold on the whole built with simple tools thing. That doesn't matter to me as much, but I do like the fact that we still have garage-built robots in Robot Wars.
Yeah.
I think that's something that we could very, very easily lose, and lose very soon. And I wouldn't want to see that.
Yeah, that would be a shame.
And then I still really think that it is a design principle that has potential. I love any team that comes in knowing that the meta is going one way and goes against it. Because if everyone goes towards the meta of Big Spinner or Armoured Wedge, things are going to get boring. Things are going to get very boring very fast. You're going to get some big hits. It's going to make for great commercials on TV. It's going to make for great highlight reels on YouTube. But to get an hour show out of it, it's going to be all filler because they're just going to be fixing stuff. So continuing to have variety, I think, is really important.
That weapon, that linear grappling. I mean, we're just rehashing episode 1. Like, that linear thing is not. If you're going to go against the meta, fine. That direction is not right.
But not every solution has to be correct.
No, it doesn't. But I'm not saying it does have to be correct. But this is why I don't like it, because I can see now, having obviously I've got the advantage of having seen its performance, hindsight, if you will. It's not a good robot, and just because it's trying something new doesn't make it a good robot. If it tried something new and it was good, that would be a good robot. Trying something new and it being bad is a bad robot. In the same way that trying something old and doing it badly is still a bad robot, and trying something new and doing it well is a good robot.
The thing is, the first iteration of it is bad. It doesn't mean that it couldn't be refined and improved until it worked. I
would love to see it. I'd love to see that. I'd love to be wrong. I always like to be wrong because it means I'm about to learn something. But I don't think I'm wrong. I don't think that design has legs.
Well, yeah, it has tentacles instead.
If he comes back, I'm not sure that he is or not. But if he does come back, or if someone else does something similar and makes an effective robot, I would genuinely love to see it.
That's fair enough. Do you think we can call this case closed for the podcast on the Jellyfish issue?
We can call it closed, yeah.
Is it going to stay closed?
That depends if you bring it up again.
That's fair enough.
in Melee 1, we have Aftershock, Eruption, and Apollo.
So Apollo the wild card, of course. Happy with that decision?
I'm not overly fond of it. I feel like I'd have rather seen someone like Pulsar. I feel like Apollo just got wildcard just because they were last series winner. But whatever. Like they're fine. I'm easy on it.
I wasn't happy with it until I thought about which robots would make this final more competitive. And with 2 big bar spinners in there, another good wedge has the potential to make it much more competitive. Whereas something like Pulsar, as much as I love it, basically dead at this point. We've got Sabretooth, basically dead. Who else have we got? Cherub? No way. No thank you. Get out. Who else was there that was an option? I'm missing a couple. Thor, who hadn't really been at their best for this series, let's be honest. So for me, it was the best of a slightly poor bunch. Not poor robots, but poor condition mostly.
I don't know what else there is to really say about the individual robots. We've discussed them at length already. So I guess we can sort of go into the big points of this first melee, which is that everyone went for Apollo.
Now, it's a very well-known fact that Will Thomas and Michael Oates are quite good friends. This was no shock whatsoever. Both drivers are good friends. They're in the same control booth, I seem to recall, as well. I seem to remember they were, anyway. So, a bit of ganging up was kind of expected. Is there anything to say about the melee itself? Of course there is, because the arena broke again.
Classic.
Hands up if you're fed up of coming back to this one. To be fair, this is the first time I think it's actually affected a fight. Apart from the whole pit issue, which Concussion ended up winning anyway, so kind of also that ends well. This is the first time that a robot has taken big damage because they've got stuck on damage.
Yeah, this is unfortunate. So after Aftershock pulled up a part of the floor, Apollo got caught under one of the floor panels, and then would have been Aftershock again, came in behind Apollo and dealt a big hit, which is a bit unfortunate.
And it's one of those things, I don't think you can say that Will Thomas was being reckless or whatever by doing that. He's just in the fight. He's chasing them. He ends up in the back of them.
I'm completely willing to believe that he just didn't really realise. And, if you're chasing him and then the robot you're chasing suddenly stops, it's like, well, you've got to have pretty quick reaction times to stop your robot as well. So, I mean, it's fair enough. It's just unfortunate that it happened. But I don't think there was a lot they could have done to avoid it.
Not at all. And Apollo's still going after that, to be fair to them. It wasn't that hit that actually killed them off completely. I don't actually know what that final hit did. Obviously, there was a gas leak. You could see and hear that gushing out. I don't know what the actual damage was that stopped them moving. You would imagine it's something like a link. They haven't taken any major structural damage from that hit. And the internals are all, hidden away by air, essentially. So it's very hard for a robot like Aftershock to get to those. So it must have been the sheer percussive shock of the hit.
Yeah, I mean, that ends a lot of robots when they're fighting spinners. Often I feel like it is just something breaks internally that you don't necessarily see on the outside. And that was that. You'll notice that we've not said anything about Eruption.
Was it Eruption that got the flip on Aftershock that damaged the floor?
No, that was Apollo.
Oh, they did nothing then.
Yeah, Eruption, genuinely, they weren't involved. They might as well not have been there. Very tactical driving.
Let's face it, if it was them versus Apollo, they wouldn't have been able to do that much in that as a fight, so they might as well leave it to Aftershock. If there's any kind of gentleman's agreement between them, they're not going to touch each other, he might as well just stay out the way. Let's face it, the way Aftershock bounces around, it doesn't really know what it's hitting half the time anyway.
No.
You might as well just steer clear.
Yeah, I mean, he did the right thing for him in terms of winning the competition, and fair enough. I mean, you're in the final, big stakes at this point, so be it.
And that takes us on to the other melee.
Yes, Melee 2, between Ironside 3, Concussion, and Carbide. A very, very spinner-heavy melee. There was more ganging up in this melee. There was ganging up all on Concussion, which seemed a bit unfair to me, because it's not as if... I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm underestimating Concussion, but I feel like they weren't going to win anyway, so it would have been nice to see them go a bit further on. It's sort of like, let's pick on the weakest one here, but that's what happened.
I mean, if you're Ironside, which one of the two do you want to go for? If you're Carbide, which one of the two do you want to go for? It's a no-brainer, isn't it? And as much as a drum has a chance to deliver a big hit on a bar, the bar on bar could be far worse. If you look at, say, Carbide, the worst that Concussion is going to do is throw them up in the air and they'll come at them again. Whereas Ironside has got the potential to take their chain out.
Yeah, it's fair enough. It's just a bit unfortunate. But I mean, the team seemed absolutely fine with it. They seemed quite happy to go out in that way. So.
Oh yeah, I mean they were basically out of spares at this point anyway, by the looks of things.
Yeah, they seemed very.
So I'm not sure they could have gone much further anyway.
No, but they seemed very pleased to be torn apart by Carbide.
And of course, Ironside took a big hit as well, which affected the rest of the final really in taking out the self-righting mechanism.
Yeah, it did.
And it wasn't even a late hit; it was a proper competitive one for once.
Yeah, Carbide did damage.
It is now the time to sort of spare a kind word for Concussion on how well they did.
They did so well. I really like how well they did. I'm very glad they got to the final. I'm very happy with them. Well done.
If they had been on the other side of the draw, they could potentially have got through it. Just unfortunate to come up against the two biggest damage machines that there were.
You can't have everything in life.
So this leaves us with the final four. Aftershock, Eruption, Ironside, and Carbide.
Yes.
I look at this, it's all about who can beat Carbide. Out of those, who do you think Carbide would be the most worried about?
I would have, having seen it now, I would guess. I mean, it's a close call between either Aftershock or Eruption, I think, are the two biggest dangers to them. Although now that
Not Ironside.
Well, no, not Ironside.
See, I would have said the complete opposite. As much as I love Aftershock, and I think if Aftershock did get a couple of hits in on Carbide, that would wreck them because it would wreck most people. But the vertical versus horizontal, the odds there are not in Aftershock's favour. And I look at Eruption. Okay, it's a good spinner, it's a decent wedge, but it's got a lot of bite points for Carbide to hit. And the timing for a flip to do anything to Carbide has got to be exceptional.
Yeah, so the reason I say that Eruption would be a danger to them is, I mean, this is, like I said, having just watched it and knowing how long Eruption has lasted against Carbide on a couple of occasions. Like, Eruption is a ridiculously tough robot. It's quite amazing. And I agree that it's really tight timing, but then, you know, Michael has shown himself to be an exceptional driver. If anyone can pull that off, it's going to be him. So I think it is a real danger to Carbide.
But even then, you've got to put it off a few times. You've got to manoeuvre them where you want them in the arena to get them out. It's just not likely to happen unless something goes wrong with Carbide. Eruption doesn't beat Carbide. Carbide loses to Eruption.
If you were talking about any other driver, I'd agree with you.
If it's going to go Eruption's way, then Eruption doesn't beat Carbide. Carbide loses to Eruption.
No, I think Michael's got it in him to beat Carbide outright.
Interesting.
I think it would be a victory by tossing him out of the arena. I don't think it would be any other way he could win. But I think he's got a good enough robot and he's a good enough driver that I think he could do that.
It's just Eruption is unequivocally the best flipper in the competition.
Yeah.
And driven by probably the best driver. But it's just not optimized to take on robots like Carbide in the way that something like an Apollo or a TR3 is. Even Rapid to a certain extent, just with the body shape, could take on something like a Carbide a little better, I feel. There are very few robots in the competition that Eruption couldn't deal with, but that is one of them. You see, for me, Ironside is the big danger, for exactly the reason that I said earlier. They have a reach advantage over them. They've literally just got a longer bar. So if the two of them go head on, Carbide is getting hit. And Carbide getting hit is rare, because very few robots can do that to them. They're going to hit the weapon first. They're not going to get a shot in at all. As it happens, of course, Carbide is also extremely well built, defensively as well as offensively. But I just see Ironside as the only real danger. Which is a shame, because I'd love to say that Aftershock is the favourite for this whole thing. But the matchups aren't in its favour.
Yeah, it just had a bit of it didn't work out for them.
Yeah, not the kindest of draws, was it? Obviously, we had Ironside Eruption first. It was a rubbish fight.
Was it a rubbish fight? I don't know. Yeah, I think all of these fights were pretty well. I think they were all right, all of them. I don't think there was anything that I would call rubbish in this episode.
They were good by the standard of the heats. I personally would have a slightly higher standard in a final for a lot of the fights. And again, it's a situation where quite a lot of these fights have been ruined by damage done before. So Ironside versus Eruption, if Ironside can self-right, that's a longer and better fight.
Yeah, definitely.
Fair play to Eruption, dealt with them brilliantly, got them over without even using the flipper.
Yep.
Again, it's very well driven, he's got on top of them, it's exactly the right way to deal with that situation, and it's worked. Won't take anything away from them, but if the Shriek's there, it's a different fight.
Carbide versus Aftershock, the big one, the most anticipated fight probably, at least for me.
Absolutely. Just knowing that if Aftershock does get the upper hand in this, Carbide could be beyond repair. The only robot you look at that could possibly do that. It's unlikely, but the only one that possibly seems to be able to do it. Imagine how different this final is if this goes the other way.
Yeah, I mean, I was always being stunned at how much power Aftershock has. Like, you look at it and you think it shouldn't have that much power, but it just seems to be so ridiculously powerful. If they'd got a good hit, an uppercut on Carbide's bar, I think this would be a very, very different final.
One good weapon-on-weapon contact, and anything can happen. But again, the design of it isn't particularly good defensively, I'd say. I think there are ways of building that to deflect blows a little bit better.
Yep.
But it is Carbide. So, as we said before, there's not a lot you necessarily can do.
No, not much.
It is a late hit again. It is a tactical late hit again that does the big damage.
Yes, it is, yeah. Just looking over my notes again to remember myself exactly what happened. Yeah, so, I mean, Aftershock sort of stopped, and then Carbide had a bit of a think about whether they're going to do anything, and then they came in right at the last minute, and they ripped a side panel off of Aftershock and sent it all the way through one layer of their bullet-resistant material around the arena, which is amazing.
What I love most is the fact that it so nearly went all the way through. It was just a little bend on the sort of back of the material that stops it going through. If it had, that's technically more impressive, but visually much less impressive. Having that sticking through with the name perfectly on show, you could not plan that better.
No, that was so good. I mean, when I first saw that, I sort of assumed that it had sort of gone in and it only sort of like sunk a few centimeters into the glass, but what glass? You know what I mean, the plasticky stuff. And but no, you're right. It's gone basically all the way through, which is mental, and very funny.
For the first time, I think this is an opportunity to praise the arena design. You know, that piece of arena has done its job completely. It has taken all the force out of that. If it gets through to the other layer, which is, 3 or 4 times thicker?
Yeah.
No danger whatsoever.
Yeah, I still wonder if they're going to put more layers in for next series.
I imagine they have done very good testing on the materials being used. If they weren't confident that this one was strong enough, they wouldn't have gone ahead.
No. But, it's the BBC. They can never be too careful.
I do feel there was a slight overreaction to this, specifically on Reddit. There are a lot of people going oh my god, that could have been so much worse. No, it was fine. The arena did its job. It went through a fraction of the protection in place. What are you moaning about?
The problem is, I think, it's because they keep advertising it as bulletproof arena. And when you hear bulletproof, you sort of assume it can stop anything. But I just to say quickly, nothing is bulletproof. Well, everything is bulletproof if you have enough of it.
Exactly.
Air is bulletproof if you have enough air in the way. And it's why I'm quite careful to always try and describe it as bullet-resistant material, because it's you're not going to get... It will slow bullets down. It will slow bits of Aftershock down. and it's designed to do exactly what it did, which is it's going to pass. It's got to do that. If it was designed to try and stop it dead without any penetration at all, then it's much more likely to start shattering, which is worse. Yeah, and you're right. It did its job, and especially if they've got like other layers of this stuff behind it as well. Like you want that to do what it did. Stop it, and then you go and replace that pane of material.
But yeah, it definitely gave the BBC something to advertise that with, didn't it? It gave them... Actually, you know what? I was not happy with the preview in episode 5 of that. To me, that was a spoiler. Because I look at that, and I go, there are 2 robots in this final with horizontal weapons that could do that. Yeah. It's definitely not Ironside, because it's too low down, the point of contact. That means that Aftershock and Carbide are definitely going to fight. So as soon as you get into the melees and you see them in separate ones, it's sort of, well, they're definitely both through.
Yeah. All the previews and even like the introduction stuff, the intro sequence, has spoilers. I mean, I was especially frustrated in the first series because obviously they didn't have any stock footage to use. Not the first series, Series 8. They didn't have any stock footage to use, so they had to use footage from the whole series. And it's like, well, you're just revealing who's in it. And part of it for me was, this is the big reboot of Robot Wars. I was really looking forward to seeing who's in it, how many robots am I going to recognise, all that kind of stuff. And it's just kind of revealed in the title sequence, which was a bit unfortunate. I feel like now they've got a few series under their belt, they can start to lean on stuff that's already been seen.
The worst for that was Series 7 when it was on Channel 5. There would be a 1.5 minute intro narrated by Jonathan Pierce that would at times show, something from the final of that episode. What I will say though is, I believe they did have some footage they could have used for that, because they did a test recording using some robots that couldn't enter the main thing. So for example, Beta, I believe, was in it. Now of course that creates some slight things of, you can't put those things on telly if it's not BattleBots. But surely they had some footage from that they could have used if they wanted to.
It's probably just easier for them to just use the footage they were going to air anyway.
Well, it's literally no difference in difficulty, surely. Slightly less to choose from.
Well, I mean, if you've got to start thinking, we can't put Beta on television, then that takes out a few fights and stuff, and you've got to comb through footage to find the bits of it that you can use and all that kind of stuff. Or maybe their test footage, what they learnt was that we shouldn't do it at all in the way that we did it, and they had to throw it all out. Who knows?
Well, given that they didn't seem to learn any lessons about filming things in the first series, that seems quite unlikely.
I'm sure they learnt something. I mean, is the test footage in the world? Can we compare the test footage to Series 8 or not?
I don't think so. If someone knows where it is, tell us, because I really want to see that.
I'd love to see it, yeah. But I mean, we've got to assume that the test footage is worse than Series 8.
But it would have been good enough for a few previews. They did do some smart stuff. So, for example, for the opening credits, they did some filming of a featherweight, Conquer 3, I think it is, who is the featherweight of one of the people or some of the people from the Crackers and Smash team. So they just got a little bit of stock footage of that smashing up a computer monitor. A little bit more of that would do it as well.
Yep.
Just film some bespoke things and don't give spoilers.
Well, like I said, they've got 2 series of big hits now, so I'm sure they could, if they wanted to, they could put together an intro series that's not got any of it. But I don't think they will. I feel like Series 10 is going to have the same kind of spoiler-filled intro and previews as Series 8 and 9.
I'm now trying to think which specific hits I think are going to make that. Supernova Pulsar is definitely going to make the intro next time round. Surely.
They're going to keep using that. I feel like they're going to keep using the one they were using this time, where I think it's the second time that Aftershock breaks the arena floor. I think they'll probably keep using that one.
Yes. Aftershock on Sabretooth as well. The late hits on them would probably be quite good.
Yeah.
They probably want a big flip in there as well, wouldn't they? What sort of big flips have we seen?
I reckon they're going to keep using Behemoth being thrown out of the arena. That's probably quite iconic.
Ooh, yes, that's a good one, that is.
Yep, that's going to keep happening, I think.
There's a good one, I think it's from this episode, actually, from the Ironside Eruption fight. There's a really good launch from Eruption where Ironside is sort of gyro-stabilised in the air.
Yeah,
that looks amazing as well.
Yeah, that's a good shot as well.
You like your video editing. You could just do your own.
I could. That would be a lot of work.
Bit copyrighty as well, but it's fine.
Yeah,
Relax.
bit of theft. Nothing wrong with that.
Hey, it's only intellectual theft, right? Basically doesn't count at all.
I think you mean freebooting.
Oh, no. Where on earth were we in the episode? I've forgotten.
Carbide versus Eruption. That was next.
I suppose this is a good time to go back to your point of Eruption does take a few good hits from Carbide.
Eruption does very well. I mean, you can tell that Eruption is a very well-built robot because Michael just drives it straight at Carbide with absolutely no regard for anything else, which is, as we've said many times, exactly what you need to do. And Eruption does not immediately fall to pieces, so it's a solidly built robot, and does very well. I feel like in both fights between Carbide and Eruption, spoiler, Carbide kind of just wins through brute force more than anything else. I feel like, if Carbide were even slightly weaker, Eruption would definitely have it.
I think that's a bold claim. we already know from the fight before that Eruption can take on big spinners and do well. What I found really interesting was the damage that was done to Eruption. Because they've got the big Hardox side pods on, which is, I think, either 10 or 12 mil Hardox, and they've been broken. But the way they've broken is that they have shattered, rather than sort of being cut or bent or whatever. They have actually properly shattered.
And they've either shattered or they've sheared. Well, I feel like shearing is more likely, but...
It's plausible. It just doesn't look right to me.
The thing is, with that kind of energies, who knows? We're getting dangerously close to talking about physics. The point is, something ridiculous has happened.
To be fair, a shear and a share are both sort of demonstrative of the brittleness of Hardox.
Yeah.
It is a very hard material, it is very good, but if you hit it hard enough, it is still, at its core, a brittle material. Which I think we can forget very easily when we see it being used as the hard, strong thing.
The hard, strong thing that seems to bend.
As failures go, bending isn't a bad failure, though.
No, but you don't associate bending with something that shatters.
Is that also an issue of thickness, though?
I have no idea. I don't know.
Would the less thin Hardox bend, whereas this thicker stuff would shatter/shear?
I don't know. I don't know enough about the physics involved, other than I think it might be to do with Young's modulus, but I think we should move on.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I was going to ask if you wanted to take a tactical step back from the physics, and then you definitely need to take a step back from the physics. Now we get Aftershock, the fixening.
The fixening, the fixening in a way that we've never before seen. I don't think that was taken down to the chassis and then rebuilt.
I mean, it makes sense that you would have to do that to weld it. Otherwise, You're getting electronics hot. Hot electronics are unhappy electronics.
That's true.
The most impressive thing for me isn't the fact they've got the repair done. It isn't the running around cooling it down. It is the fact that Will manages to be so polite to the person from the production crew who's asking if they're going to be ready. He's in this really high-stress situation. Who can honestly say they wouldn't have shouted at that person when they came around asking?
I think with the knowledge that there are cameras on you, that's probably quite an incentive to not yell at them, but yeah.
Hey, if you can think that clearly in the heat of the moment, then I admire you.
Yeah, they did. They were clearly both very, very stressed. And it's also like classic father-son relationship there, like two guys that are very similar, both have their own idea of what's right. And I mean, I'd be exactly the same with my dad, just sort of like really biting at each other in those kind of situations.
The team dynamics like that are quite interesting. Because what I think we see with a few teams is you've got father-son teams, or, elder-younger teams, where the youngers are probably the people with the more expertise. And I feel like that's kind of... Maybe I'm reading into something that's not there. I feel like that's possibly the case with Aftershock. I would definitely say it's the case with Pulsar, because I know that Ellis pretty much does that himself, and his parents are there to help.
With Aftershock, isn't it the guy's dad that does the building of the robot? At least that's what they say in the VT.
From the build diary I saw of Shockwave, it seemed like Will doing pretty much all of it.
Fair enough.
But that might be misleading. It's not the best information to be going on necessarily.
Well, I feel like their own build log is probably better than the VT that the BBC use.
Oh yeah, but it could also, anything like that could be misleading. It could have been that he filmed those things in the moments when he was on his own. Because, I don't know, he didn't want his dad doing the filming with him or something like that. There could be any kind of reason.
Yeah.
It's just the vibe that I've gotten. And also what we tend to see as well is that the younger people tend to do the driving.
That's probably just parents just letting their kids have fun, though. More than anything.
Or is it giving over to the greater reflexes and eyesight?
I mean, that's one way of looking at it. I'm going to stick with my interpretation.
Why not both? In terms of the fight, we finally get a good weapon-on-weapon contact. And Ironside are lucky to land on their wheels.
Yeah.
Normally, you'd expect the gyro effect to keep them stable. That did not happen here. It was pure luck to land the right way up.
They did very well, and they got lucky again at the end with their finishing blow, I feel. Because for me, I feel like despite Aftershock having duct tape for armour, I still feel like they were dominating this fight right until the end.
Actually, even when the weapon went, they were still driving straight onto Ironside's weapon. They were super aggressive throughout. And if that goes to the judges, there's a good chance they've got it. And it's the floor spike that has done it. Which is something that we haven't seen in a while, really. Back in Series 3, floor spikes won more fights than robots did. But this time, they've been quite sort of unobtrusive, really.
Yeah, generally speaking.
So yeah, definitely, well, from my point of view, unfortunate not to get something out of that fight.
Yeah, I think, if it went to the judges, then I think Aftershock would have won. And I think if Ironside, didn't get that lucky hit, I feel like Aftershock would still probably have done very well. It was a tense fight, I have to say.
And considering we could have had a robot just not working, I think we're very lucky to have had that fight, really.
Yeah, it's just absolutely amazing that Aftershock worked as well as it did after all that.
To get in running at all is something. To get in with the weapon working as well, that's an exceptional bit of work.
Yep.
Not that it necessarily worked as it should have, but...
I feel like at some point they tried to turn too quickly and the gyro effects sort of caused them to hit themselves or something, I don't know. But there were sparks flying.
Yes, I believe the motor mounting might not have been quite as it should have been. I think maybe some chassis twist from the carbide fight or whatever meant that things weren't aligned quite so. Which has then created issues like that.
Poor Aftershock.
Carbide Ironside.
Poor Ironside.
They got a hit in. And they were very close to taking that chain out.
Very, very close. But not close enough.
One thing I did notice, I can sometimes be a bit critical of Ironside in terms of the power they have in that weapon. But they took a properly good gouge out of the wall. I think by the pit release, when they caught that early in the fight. Yeah, they made a really nice deep scratch in that.
Yeah, and it's a not insignificant chunk out of the axle in Carbide's spinner. So
absolutely, yeah.
It's a powerful weapon, and it's also probably their strongest armour. It's really funny seeing these two like big spinners and stuff when they're hitting each other. If they're hitting any other robot, all hell breaks loose. But when they're hitting each other, because they're both designed to deal with that kind of impact through their weapon, they're just almost nothing happens. It's kind of weird.
I have said in the past that I find Ironside forgettable, and I still do. But it's fights like that where you have to respect them. Even if you don't remember them, you've got to respect them. Because they have done a very good job to get through that fight, as well as they did. Winning it would have been nice, though.
It would. But they didn't. And
so screw them.
Screw them. Well, but yet more restraint from Carbide here. It always, Carbide seems to be really sort of touch and go when it comes to these hits right at the end of a fight. Where sometimes they just go in for one last hit just because, and then sometimes they don't. They look like they're thinking about it, like they got pretty close to Ironside 3, but they just didn't do anything at the end there. They just sort of let Ironside be counted out.
It does seem as though they only go in on things that they think they're going to fight again. It does seem more and more tactical, and I still don't know how I feel about that. I feel like that is a fault of the system rather than the individuals. You know, that shouldn't be a thing they have to think about. You should be able to smash something into submission. And then maybe smash it a couple more times.
The format always wins. Should we move on to Eruption versus Aftershock?
We shall move on. I mean, what a fight. What a fight it was.
Very good fight.
If we can have a few more of those, I'll be very happy.
This is the second time that Aftershock have ripped up part of the floor. But both teams decide that that's fine and they're going to carry on without waiting for the arena to be repaired.
Everyone's so sick of repairing it that they stopped caring about repairing it.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if they stopped caring or if they were running out of time and they kind of pressured these two guys to just be like, just carry on anyway if you could, or maybe Eruption and Aftershock just that genuinely were fine with it and we're like, well, screw it, let's just carry on.
You know what I would have loved to have seen? Just 4 little orange cones and some warning tape around that bit.
That would have been
just
great.
so Aftershock could go and annihilate one of the cones, and then probably get entangled in the tape.
You should. They should just weld the cones to the floor.
What, weld the plastic cones?
No, weld like solid metal cones that aren't going anywhere. Weld them to the
is
floor.
that not technically a bollard at that point?
Yeah, and then if someone like Aftershock is stupid enough to come along and try and hit them, then they break themselves.
I mean, that's how the wall is meant to work, but it's not worked that way.
That is true, but then that's not all welded together. That's bolted together.
True, it is the bolts that have been failing. This fight really reminds me of the Series 5 semi-final between Bigger Brother and Hypnodisc.
Does it now?
Now, I know you're not big on the old series, but is that a fight you remember?
No.
So, Bigger Brother, Flipper, very well driven. Hypnodisc, the big damage robot of its time. Bigger Brother starts off quite well, backs onto Hypnodisc to try and slow the disc, sort of happily takes the hits on the back, mostly holds up against them. But then partway through the fight, they start taking a lot more damage. The back is getting pretty torn up. They can't reasonably lead with that anymore. They start going in with the front. The flipper's broken. Everything's broken. And the more damage they took, the more bold they became in going at Hypnodisc. The less they had to lose. So the more they just pressured it and pressured it and pressured it. And very late on, they've hit the pit release and got Hypnodisc down. Incredible comeback. Honestly, kind of ruined the final, because Hypnodisc versus Razor would have been a much better final. But it's an incredible comeback. And this is very similar in that you've got the flipper taking a pasting and then winning thanks to an arena hazard. There's just so many parallels here.
Yeah.
And again, it plays right into your analysis of Eruption as a very hardy robot.
It's amazingly tough, that thing. It is amazing.
We also have the damage to dead metal as well.
A very tactical lack of use of the saw from Dead Metal. There was a point where any other robot or in any other orientation, the saw would have gone out. But I feel like in this case, if Dead Metal had done that against Aftershock, then Dead Metal would have lost his saw.
I understand there was some point during the series where, I don't know if it was all Roboteers or even possibly specifically Aftershock or Carbide or someone, who were basically told, please don't damage the house robots anymore.
Oh, that annoys me. That's rubbish.
In fairness...
No, there is no fairness. The house robots come out and destroy the robots that these guys have worked so hard to make. They should be allowed to do it straight back. The BBC have got the money and the manpower to repair them.
I completely agree that they should be allowed to hurt them. But from a production point of view, you do kind of need them. So, Dead Metal, that arm was written off. Completely. That's had to be redone. That thing was completely wrecked.
Poor BBC.
And they need to have their house robots to come in for other fights. Less of an issue in the final, of course. But, say Shunt took a beating and couldn't come out. That only leaves Sir Killalot as one that they can put in against Spinners. So it just starts to sort of, I was going to say hurt the show. Hurts the show in a really minor way. At least if a competitor goes out because they take a pasting, there are reserves that can come in.
Reserve house robots. I mean, not so like the house robots just for sort of historical value. I feel like BattleBots is very entertaining with no house robots, and I feel like the same would be true over here. But it wouldn't be quite the same.
The house robots are there to ensure action when the competitors don't provide it. That's really what they're there for. And in the older series, that was completely necessary because there were lots of fights where neither robot were capable of doing anything. We're maybe reaching that crossover point where they're no longer necessary for that reason. But they're such an integral part of the show that you can't get rid of them at this point.
Yeah, it'd be really weird without them.
Love them or hate them, they have to stay. What BattleBots does have is a more... I was going to say more interesting arena, but it's an arena that interferes more, really.
Does it interfere more?
You've got saws coming out of the floor.
Yeah.
You've got big hammers being controlled by the teams. You've got the screws as well, which can basically end a fight. And there's no element of strategy like there is with, say, the pit, where you've at least got to release it and take a slight risk to do that.
What risk is there in opening the pit?
Roadhouse Robot.
Pa.
Which admittedly hasn't been that much of a big deal.
No.
But in theory, that's what that was there for, to add an element of risk to that.
I don't know, man. I feel like the competitors should be allowed to do what they want to the house robots. I would love to see some like big spinners go against Killalot and tear it apart. I did notice in this one, by the way, that Killalot has like an I-beam on his back, which maybe made me laugh.
Yes. It's pretty solid, isn't it?
I feel like that's been very clearly added. I don't know if that was been added or not, but I noticed it this time, so I'm going to assume that it's new.
I feel like that's been there for a while.
It probably has been, but yeah, it's quite funny.
I think that might even have been a feature on the original.
Yeah, I don't know why it's the first time I noticed. It just makes me laugh that it is just an I-beam. There's not anything else.
It's not really dressed up, is it?
No.
Of course, we're saying this about damaging the house robots. You could argue it's actually Eruption that did the damage, because they pushed Aftershock further into dead metal.
This is an interesting idea. If you had a grappling robot that was that could hold on to someone, then if you could get behind Carbide and grab them and then just drive Carbide around and smash them into other robots.
Just use them as your own weapon.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe Jellyfish 2.0 will pull that off.
I mean, so you said you wanted to put this to bed, but you're the one that keeps bringing this up.
I mean the whole engineering debacle. I will continue to talk about Jellyfish being a better robot than you make out.
What do you mean that I make out? It's a rubbish robot. Like the evidence is there.
Okay, do we need to list all the robots it got more points than?
Shall we move on to to the final?
The final.
The final. Not
necessarily the final we would all have wanted or predicted, but it was a good final.
It was. Carbide's longest fight.
Oh, God.
Oh, God. Is that inaccurate? Have I been lied to by the BBC?
No, that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
I'm actually wondering if Carbide's two longest fights were both against Eruption.
I wouldn't surprise me, given how...
I think it's possible. The only one that may have gone longer is Crackers and Smash before the forfeiture.
That's true, actually, yeah, maybe. I don't know. I'm sure someone will tell us.
Hope so. Is there a chance for Eruption?
I don't think. I think at this point they've just taken a little bit too much already. I think if they were brand new, they'd stand a much better chance, because Carbide is pretty damn close to brand new still at this point. They took so little damage throughout this heat.
You know what? You say it's their longest fight. I can't help thinking that this fight should have been stopped sooner, because Eruption lost drive on the right side pretty early on. And they managed to get away with wiggling around and looking mobile purely because Carbide kept hitting them. You know, Carbide could easily have sat there, sat back, let the judges see that Eruption was immobile and had the fight there. I'm very glad that they didn't do that. I'm glad they went in and did more.
That would have been a rubbish fight. The fact that I didn't really notice that Eruption wasn't all that mobile speaks volumes to me. I think if Carbide had done the one hit that was necessary or whatever and then stopped, then that would have been a really, really lame ending to the series. So they did exactly what they should have done. And it still took a lot. It still took a lot to sort of to start like tearing bits off Eruption as well.
And fair play to Eruption for continuing to, wiggle around as best they could and look as mobile as possible to keep it going. You know, they've tried to get some flips in. It's cost them the entirety of their flipping arm.
Yeah, good. It was a good fight, and I think the for me the right robots were there. To be honest, I mean, I'd have been happy if it was Aftershock as well, but Eruption, good robot. I really like it. In case that wasn't clear.
Yeah, I too would have liked to have seen an Aftershock Carbide final, but it would probably been over in 2 hits one way or another, wouldn't it?
Yeah, with that much energy, there's not much scope for a long fight.
And the one thing we did get as well, which links quite nicely back to what we were just saying, really, is that we do finally get to see a bit of a tussle with the House robots. But apparently, at filming, that went on for literally a couple of minutes.
What? And they didn't show it all?
Yeah.
That's bullshit.
So they made it look like Carbide was just stopped immediately by the House robots. Oh, a couple of shoves off of Killalot and that bar stopped working. No, they went at them for a while, apparently.
I'm not angry, BBC. I'm just disappointed.
I mean, you could easily find 2 minutes of stuff to cut from this episode, couldn't you, to fit that in?
Well, you could stop introducing the robots twice. That would save you some time.
Especially seeing as we've already met them from their heats.
Yeah. Well, I feel like in the final, what you could do to save some time is not tell us the format of the show anymore because we've seen it 5 times already, and not introduce all these robots twice in this episode. Those are some easy wins.
I mean, the format is technically different this time round.
Not different enough. I mean, all the coverage of, and if you hit the pit button, then maybe a rogue house robot will happen. We don't need to be told that anymore. We've seen it.
That can all definitely go.
Oh yes.
And that really is the series.
That's it. All done. It was a good series. I think it was better than Series 7. No, 8. Series 8.
You're correct on both fronts. Are you sure you're prepared for this rating?
I am never prepared for your ratings.
I think it's time for you to open your final PDF of the series.
Oh man, I'm gonna miss this in the next episode, man. Right then, I'm opening it. I see a blank page. Mate, are you serious?
Deadly serious.
No way. Okay, right. So, I have received a PDF with a blank page. I scroll down and it has the text on it. Look left. Now look back at the screen because there's more stuff to read. Open the bottom drawer of the set on your left. So there is a chest of drawers to my left. I'm going to go and open it. My audio will sound even worse than usual. One sec. It's this fancy new microphone. It ruined everything. Oh, damn it, man!
I think you need to come back and explain to the people what you've got.
Oh. The spawn of Satan, that's what I've got. I've been given a small foam core model of jellyfish.
You will notice that the small foam core model of jellyfish, lovingly crafted may I add, is not yet complete.
No.
Do you have the spare part?
There's the spare part, which I presume is the articulating bit in the middle of its ridiculous grappling system.
It is indeed.
Okay.
To rate this episode, I would like you to place the grappling arm on a scale of left to right. Left being awful episode, right being amazing episode.
You've outdone yourself, man. This is the most ridiculous thing.
You're completely right. It is ridiculous.
Give me 2 seconds to do this. I want to go and put my phone on a tripod and film me doing it. I have started recording. So what am I doing? So left is bad, and right is good. Is that what was happening here?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Tell us about your choices.
Well, I think it's an episode that's probably bad for podcasting because it's not the world's most controversial thing, so there's not a huge amount to say really. But it was an enjoyable episode. I did enjoy rewatching it, so I'm gonna go for maybe an 80% over towards the right. go in here.
Fortunately, I now have my own replica here.
Have you got your own jellyfish?
No, don't worry, I don't.
Right, give me. I'm just putting the. Put it. There we go. It's in. Jellyfish is now complete with the with the gripping bit at about 80% towards the right there.
I think this might be the death of the ratings, purely because there's nowhere to go after this.
I think that's it. I think you've topped everything really. I mean, unless there's a robot that I dislike more.
There is a very good chance there's a robot you're going to dislike more. But it's okay, because I already dislike it, so there'll be no controversy there.
Oh, that's a shame.
Hey, maybe you'll love it, or you'll just choose to cause conflict.
If you had a jellyfish over there, where would you have put the gripping bit?
It's interesting, because before we did this recording, I would probably have put it further left than I would now. I think you have, to a certain extent, convinced me this is a better episode than I was making it in my own head.
Victory is mine.
I genuinely would probably put it about where you did, around that sort of 80% mark.
Yeah, cool. We agree on something.
God, it must be the end of the series. So in the spirit of rankings, we've done a bit of extra ranking for today's episode.
For a loose definition of we.
Yeah. I've decided to stick my neck out, nail my colours to the mast, and I have 2 1 to 40 lists of robots. The first is what I think is objectively the best robot to the worst robot, and then a very different list of my favourite to my least favourite. Where would you like to start?
I think what we should do is publish the full list on the website, because I think you're
That's happening.
I think you're grossly underestimating how long it's going to take to read through 80 robots.
I'm not necessarily going to go through the whole thing, but the whole thing is there to be put up. I have notes on all of them of why they are good or bad as well.
Goodness me. I reckon we just top and tail. Do you want to go through your objectively best, like top 5 or something?
Okay. Reading it, I'm not that happy with it, but I'm going to go with it. Because I'm not happy with my number 1. One thing I will say, out of my top 5, only 3 of them are grand finalists. I think there are some very good robots that didn't make it through. And I know you're going to argue with me when I say them.
Well, I just want to make a point quickly, which is that the correct order when you're ranking things from objectively best to worst is the order that they scored in the tournament.
True. I suppose the caveat is I'm kind of looking at... I'm trying to take luck and draw out of the element, if that makes sense.
Yeah, potential.
Or out of the equation, should I say.
Yeah.
So there are certain robots that had really tough draws or just had really bad luck. Although some of the luck you could argue is design. My number 5 is Eruption. It is my highest rated flipper out of the lot. If it were a more anti-spinner optimized design, I may have put it higher. But the driving in particular is the thing that really makes it special. I'm not sure it's necessarily that special as a robot. It is the driving that makes it top 5 material. Number 4, I've put Terahertz.
Yes. We agree on something.
Good. I was really worried you were going to pan me for that.
No, the thing is, so like the one list I have is sort of more opinion more than anything, or like my feelings towards it.
Yeah, the thing I love about Terahertz, it's gone through lots of iterations. It has got better and better and better. It is extremely good at what it does. What it does isn't necessarily the best way to build a robot, but I don't think you could build a better axe robot than Terahertz. So that's why I've put it so high up.
Okay.
Number 3, I've put Pulsar. And I fully recognise that this is my bias getting into my objectivity.
No, how can you possibly have a ranking that you're claiming is objectively best to worst and have Pulsar even close to the top?
Take the breakdowns out of the equation. It is deadly.
But you can't take the breakdowns out of the damn equation. That's not bad luck, that's bad design.
I think it's an element of both.
You are so
Again,
wrong.
I think
you are so wrong.
With this one, I fully recognise that I am ranking potential too highly. Get that thing working properly, it is a grand finalist and it is competing every time.
I don't think you understand the meaning of the word objectively.
I think I understand it. It's just whether I've applied it correctly here. The next two you probably won't argue with. Number 2, Aftershock.
Yes, fair enough.
Such a persistent spinner.
Yep.
Just hits and hits and hits. That disc barely seems to slow on impact. And obviously, being a vertical, it can just keep driving at an opponent. Beautiful design. Extremely well sort of actualized. Incredible.
Yep. Yeah, very good robot.
Number 1, I've put Carbide. And I wish I could justify putting it lower.
Why? What do you not like about Carbide?
That's the thing. There's nothing I don't like about it. I think I'm just a bit...
You like the underdogs, man. You like the underdogs or the people that do things differently. I feel like Carbide is too middle of the road for you.
It's too mainstream for me.
You hipster, you.
The strength of Carbide is its reliability above all else.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
there are
series,
other
anyway.
bar spinners out there that can deal damage. There are other robots out there that can deal big damage, Aftershock being one of them. Carbide is the one that never stops dealing it.
Yeah.
And I suppose I begrudge having to put it top for reliability alone. But I've put it there because I know it's objectively the right thing to do.
Well, yeah, it won.
Have I clawed back some objectivity points?
Well, I don't know, man. Like, Pulsar, I just...
I knew you'd be unhappy with it. It's a hard one to justify myself, but I had to have a drum up there somewhere. Would you like to hear my bottom 5?
Yeah, go for it.
Not many surprises in here.
I bet that it's going to be a very different list to mine.
I think it's going to be a slightly different list to yours.
Okay,
In
then.
36th place, it's
Yep.
High Five.
Yeah.
I don't understand the point of the weapon design. I appreciate there are good design touches in there, but I think those good design touches need to be in something better for me to rate them enough to get it out of that bottom 5.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
In 37th place, I've got Crustacean. It's just from a much more gentle time. They didn't really do any upgrades to get it ready for this. I could possibly have put it lower if it weren't for the other 3. Number 38, Miss Nightshade.
That doesn't surprise me.
It flails and doesn't work. Number 39 is Trolley Rage,
Okay.
because I don't see the potential of that to do anything at all. And in 40th place is Frostbite, on the
Shocker.
basis that it is Frostbite.
Who saw that? See, this is again much less objective than I think you think it is.
I'm saying this is objective because I haven't put Cherub in the bottom 5. I have got Cherub at 32. Admittedly, I have got Jellyfish at 30. And there's a very easy argument to be made that that is the wrong way round.
Yeah. It's so easy, in fact, I'm not even going to bother.
Cherub got to a heat final on the basis of dodgy decisions. I don't think the robot was good enough to get there. And I suppose a dodgy tactical decision as well from Behemoth. They were lucky to get as far as they did.
Yeah, they got through on luck. There's no denying that.
They are worthy of being in the competition, I've at least given them that much now, but not much above that. I'm trying to think if there are any other positions that you'd be interested in that I've sort of made. I've got Foxic at 15, which I know you won't agree with.
Mate, 15, really?
I've got PP3D quite high as well, just on the basis of when it works, it really works. I've got them at 13.
Okay.
I'm trying to think, what's the most successful robot that I've put quite low, apart from Cherub? I've just realised that I put Rusty above some other things. And I've just seen that my reason is it's not as objectively bad as the other 6 below it.
Deary me.
Yeah, that is my set of ratings for that.
Okay.
Now, you've rated on the basis of favourites more than anything, haven't you?
Yeah, generally speaking, I've picked out my 5 favourite and my 5 least favourite. Which would you like to hear first? How shall I anger you first?
I don't think I'm going to be that angry either way.
I don't know. I feel like my bottom 5 are probably quite predictable. And
Do you want to go with those first then, just so there's more of a surprise with the
Well,
top
I don't think
5?
there's gonna be a surprise with the top either. To be honest, I'm gonna go in the same order you did. I'm gonna go 5 to 1 and then 36 to 40.
Okay, go for it.
So number 5 we have Thor.
Really?
I like Thor.
It's not a massive shock, but I didn't think you would have something that wasn't hyper successful at the top of your list. I thought that your personal favourites and your objectively best list would be basically identical.
I like Thor. I feel like I'm influenced a lot by Series 8 Thor, to be honest.
I mean, they're completely different robots, but I can see why you'd have that sort of cognitive bias.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, they're sort of like, there's a lineage there that I like. But I don't know. I'm happy with Thor at number 5. I mean, something else could maybe go there. I mean, possibly PP3D, possibly... there was another one that I had my eye on, and I've lost it, and I can't remember the name of it. This is a nightmare.
We'll wait. As long as it takes.
No, not worth it. Yeah, there are others that could have gone there, possibly PP3D. But yeah, I'm happy with Thor. I'm happy with Thor being where it is. At number 4, I have Terahertz.
Hey, snap!
Yeah, because Terahertz is a great robot. I really like it for all the reasons that you like it. Number 3 is Aftershock.
I was wondering if it might struggle to make your top 5, so I'm glad it's there at all.
Oh no, I really like that robot. Actually, I think the first time I watched through this series when it was airing originally, I was less keen on it. But having watched it again and having spoken to you for a while, I do like it. It's a very, like I said, I was constantly amazed by how much power it has. So, and I feel like I'm also much more distanced now from Shockwave, which is a robot that I really don't like. So now that we're distant from that now, I can look at Aftershock in its own light, and it's good.
I'm surprised that Aftershock had to grow on you, purely because it was the big deal of the first episode, and it made the first episode great. For me, no episode this series lived up to that, and that's thanks to Aftershock. So I find it weird that it had to grow on you.
Well, I feel like probably a lot of it was just still feeling bitter about Shockwave, so so there you go.
Beating your beloved Thor.
Shocking. At number 2, do you want to have a guess?
Eruption.
No, Carbide.
Oh!
Carbide is number 2. Carbide, I would agree with you that it is objectively the best. Like, it won the tournament, and I really do like Carbide, but Eruption does pip it for me just a little bit.
Wow.
I just like Eruption more. I think, again, this is a robot that's probably grown on me as I've rewatched this and been a bit more analytical about it. Eruption is driven so well, like so well. It's amazing. It's sort of, yeah, I just really like it. I really like everything about that robot.
That's really fascinating to me, because even though I know you love Eruption, I think I have this feeling in my head that no one ever puts Flippers top. And now you say it, and now you justify it. It completely makes sense that you would think that, and I really can't argue with it that much. But for me, in my head, I just assume that people love the Spinners most. The things that do the damage most.
I've always liked Flippers. I think Chaos 2 is probably one of my favourite robots as well. Like, that's always been... That's been an important robot in my life. No, it's I don't know. I just generally speaking, I do quite like Flippers. I feel like, I mean, Spinners are amazing in their own way, but I feel like these Flippers, that to do well, you have to have just a little bit more finesse, I guess. I don't know, or a little bit more control, a little bit more something to do well with them. So when you've got a Flipper that's doing really well, then for me that's a bit more impressive. And also, just like, the toughness of, as we've discussed in this episode, the toughness of Eruption is something else. It's almost like, it's Cherub with a flipper. It's a very impressive robot.
No, I'm completely on board with those choices. Fair play.
Cool.
Now the bottom 5.
Number 36. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Guess? Do you want to have a guess?
See, it won't be jellyfish yet, that's the thing, surely. Surely you can't find 4 things you dislike more. I want to say, if I guess, I'm just going to tell you my bottom 5, so you just hit me with it.
Okay, number 36 is Foxic. For me?
That should have been more obvious to me, shouldn't it? I should have had a pop at that. Hang on. Foxic. Okay, just edit that.
Oh, dearie me.
I have that power now.
Yeah, Foxic is, it's not quite the worst robot for me, but it's, I feel like, the problem is, I feel like it's down there so low just as a rebellion against you, I think, more than anything.
That's exactly why some of mine are so high. There
I
are
feel
so
like-
many robots that I would have just not really cared about either way, but by having to defend them against you, I've ended up loving them.
I mean, to be completely fair, like I didn't like Foxic in either series. Like it's been a robot that is lower on the scale of things than neutral. But I think it's lower than it would otherwise be, just to spite you. But yeah, not a fan of it. Number 37, we have Ms. Nightshade for its ineffectual flailing, and
Is that purely based on the lack of testing? Or do you dislike the design as well?
there's lots of things. I mean, I just mainly a lack of testing. I just don't think it's a very good robot.
Does that mean that I'm going to hear the name Rusty quite soon as well?
You know what? Rusty is so forgettable to me that it's just not even on this list.
That's fair. That's completely fair.
I feel like because this is sort of like top and bottom, less on their merits and stuff, and just it's sort of top and bottom that I like or dislike, and these are the ones that come to mind when I think about robots that are there. I mean, Ms. Nightshade I think it's a bit harsh. Now that I think about it a bit more, bit harsh, but it's there. Number 38, we have Heavy Metal.
Ooh.
With its
I want to hear more about this.
with its weapon that we don't know what it does.
Does the air of mystery not excite you? Sort of, ooh, will we find out next time? No, we won't.
I don't get it. It's a weird robot. I think a part of it is because it reminds me so much of Wheelie Big Cheese. It's just but it's not nearly as good.
Not nearly as fun.
Not nearly as anything. Below it we have Chimera 2.
Mm-hmm.
Which should be of no surprise.
Yeah, you'll find no argument from me there.
For its ineffective axe and ridiculous wedge on the front of it. And at number 40, I'll give you one guess. It's Jellyfish!
It's Jellyfish.
Surprising absolutely no one.
If you weren't presenting this list to me, do you think Jellyfish would still be bottom?
If I weren't presenting it to you, and if I spent more time looking at it, what would be different? I think it would be. I think I can't understate how much it annoys me what he said at the beginning.
I'm not saying this is a criticism at all. It's just an interesting bit of psychology that we are presenting these to each other,
Yeah.
and then sort of knowing we've got to justify them.
Yeah, I think it definitely makes a difference. I mean, I'm just looking down this, and there's like, what is worse for me than Jellyfish? I mean, there's arguments to be made for all kinds of things. Depends how you rank it, I guess. Like, I mean, I could almost argue that Rapid should be there because it's so hyped up and then so rubbish, or Nuts 2, another similarly rubbish robot in the end.
So, is this a good time for me to go through my bottom 5?
Yeah, I feel like
Just in case there's crossover here.
Yeah,
Because there kind of is.
Let's do it.
At 36, I have Rapid.
Fair enough.
It is the new Mortis, and I never liked Mortis. So I'm very happy to say I just dislike it. It's interesting that you say about where your neutral point is. I'm going to go through this later and try to find the band of robots that I am just neutral on.
Okay.
Because I think it is most of it.
Yeah,
I think there's only really a bottom 6 of things that I do actively dislike.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I think there's a lot of these that I'm looking at that I just sort of forget about, really. Like Rusty is one of them. Like, now that you say it, yeah, that should. If I were doing an objective list, that would be very, very close to the bottom. But it's just lost in the noise.
I do have Rusty next up at 37. But I think that's partly because I wrote this after editing episode 5. Which means that Rusty was on my mind. I think if I'd done this slightly fresher to everything, or equally not fresh to everything, it wouldn't even have entered my mind to put it down there. Because again, it is just a thing that existed for a very brief time.
Yeah.
Number 38, Chimera 2.
Yep.
And then my bottom 2 will not shock anyone. It's Cherub and Frostbite.
Who saw that coming?
Cherub, again, I'm aware that this is the thing I am most biased against. I am being harsh on Cherub by disliking it this much. But this is a subjective list, so I get to do that. Frostbite, I am very happy to have bottom. I will never feel bad about that. That's fine. It's just fine for that to be there.
For a more positive spin, what are your top 5 favourites?
Trying to work out how much of a shock any of these will be, actually.
Probably not.
Because there is crossover with my top 5 generally, which is maybe a sign that my other top 5 wasn't as objective as it could have been. But at number 5, I have Concussion. 2 reasons. Number 1, I love drums. Second of all, first time entry makes the grand final. Got my respect there. Number 4, Terahertz again. You know, it's the only classic robot that still works, so fantastic. Number 3, Sabretooth. I love the aesthetics. I love the team. I mean, this really isn't about team.
Kind of isn't.
On my list, the team can get you up the list, but the team isn't going to get you down the list, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Nothing at the bottom is a comment on the teams, but stuff at the top definitely is a comment on the teams. And these are all groups of people that I really enjoy watching. So Sabretooth is up there. Number 2, continuing my massive bias towards drums, is Pulsar. It looks beautiful, it's pushing the envelope even if it's failing, and it is a drum.
I mean, I'm less annoyed about it this time because it's a much more subjective list, but it still shouldn't be there, mate.
I'm allowed to like what I want to like.
You are.
Number 1, very, very obviously, Aftershock.
No surprises there.
It made me love this series. I mean, I don't know if I mentioned it on here before, but I must have seen Heat A verging on double figures times now. It's that good to me.
Fair enough.
I kind of want to quickly look through my list as well and just find some surprises or not surprises.
Okay.
Jellyfish and Nuts both make top 10.
What? Where are they? What numbers?
6 and 7.
What?
Jellyfish at 6.
Jellyfish at 6? Are you having a laugh?
Again, it's favourite. I think you can tell. I really like it.
What's number 6? Where are they on your objective list? Jellyfish was
on
at
my
13.
objective list,
Where's Nuts 2?
Jellyfish is at a generous 30. Nuts 2 is at 26. So neither are making top half.
Okay.
The main thing that puts Nuts anywhere at all in both of those lists is the Melty Brains. That's something I'm just really excited to see work at some point.
Yep, I'd love to see that working as well.
Looking at difference between my 2 lists, Eruption and Carbide are at 14 and 15 respectively. They're very much in my I don't necessarily have an opinion range. I have opinions on how good they are. I just don't really like or dislike either. I think it's more a question of respecting them than liking them.
You baffle me. You really do.
I know, it's great. I think that's all of the surprises. You won't be happy to know that Thor is bottom half, but it is 21.
Where's Ironside 3?
Have a guess. Give me a 5-place range that you think it's in.
Given that you keep forgetting about it, I would guess somewhere in the middle.
Okay, so give me a 5-place range.
What? You need to do maths, man? I don't know, like...
10 to 15, 15 to 20, 20 to 25. I know they're technically 6-place ranges, but...
I mean, I was going to go some more like, 18 to 23 or something, but,
Well, that's a shame because it's 17.
Damn it!
Again, it is forgettable to me, but it has been involved in some great fights as well. So out of my I don't have an opinions, it's quite high.
Fair enough.
Any more you want to ask about on either list?
I'm just shocked. Where's Supernova?
Okay, so on the objective list,
Yeah.
Supernova is quite high up, to be fair. I've put it 9.
Okay.
I would be more likely to move it down than up. Again, it's a question of something that's a simple design that's been well optimized over a few iterations. For my like list, it is lower. It is 18. And the note I've put with it is killed Frostbite. That's the main thing that's got it top half.
Surely that's got to be top 10 just for that. Come on.
You'd think that, but my top 10 is pretty packed out with great robots. You know, there's Jellyfish in there, there's Nuts in there, there's Foxic. There's great robots in there. Oh, God. Oh. I have just noticed that I may have put Worm 11th. And the
11th?
note next to it.
Are you having a laugh? Your entire
Again,
list is invalid.
I haven't looked at this in a while. I do perhaps regret that one. The note next to it is even better, though. The note says, great idea. Would be top 10, but it let me down. So it could have been worse.
Where's that hang up button? Where is it?
So yeah, that is my list.
Ridiculous.
It will
That's what
be
that
put up for people to criticise. Not sure whether I'll put the notes with it or not. I'm not sure if they make things better or worse for things at the bottom, but we'll see. We'll see. So today, instead of armchair engineering, we're kind of doing some armchair producing. To take a quick look at how the show is put together, things we might want to change for next time, particularly thinking about format, because that's the thing we've moaned about most, really. I don't really have the energy to go into camera work and things like that.
I think other than saying it could use improvement, there's not much else to say about it.
We definitely can't comment on editing, considering how long it takes us to put together a podcast.
One day we'll do it quickly. You never know.
We will. Possibly. I don't know how you want to start with this, really. Because I've got a few things that I think are faults of the current system in general.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest fault, and I think this is where we should start, is with the tournament format. With this round-robin type thing.
What specific issues are you looking at that as creating? Because I've got a few problems that I think that creates. So I think it obviously gives us the trouble with robots being broken, going into fights, and rubbish fights because of it. I think the format also, it doesn't do a good job of ensuring the best robots tend to go through. And that's particularly early on through the melees. If I had to change one thing, I would probably scrap melees before I scrap round robin.
I think the tournament format in general, I think that those 2 points are things that probably annoy me the most. I feel like they could keep the same tournament format but spread out filming so that you don't have this problem of robots being in a state of complete disrepair for some of their fights. But I think you're right. I think the biggest thing is that without a proper seeding system, you end up with silly rounds like Carbide and Apollo in the same heat when they probably shouldn't be, and you end up with otherwise very good robots being taken out inside of 2 minutes of competing, which is also a bit rubbish. Like, Razor disappearing down the pit because of Cranky is something that I will never not be annoyed about.
It is interesting to blame the format for that, but it's stuff like that that's why I'm bringing it up as well, so I'm as bad as you.
Well, it's just sort of like, I know it's not entirely the format's fault, but it's just rubbish that was the only opportunity they had to do anything, and it was gone inside of 2 minutes or whatever, and then it's like, well, brilliant. Now I can't see one of my favourite robots ever fighting. Even if it was going to lose constantly after that, I would still love to have seen it more.
And one thing that this format does really well is that if a robot gets through, we get to see plenty of it.
Yeah.
So that is something that I would want to try and maintain as best as I could. But the flip side of it is that we have a lot of robots just going straight out and we never see anything from them again. Which, if you do change format, is something you can potentially address. So, have you got any thoughts on specifically how you would format things?
I really like the tournament format that is used in BattleBots, actually.
You like the tournament format? How do you feel about the episode format that creates?
I feel like a lot of the problems I have with that show are the fact that it's an American thing, so there's ad breaks constantly, and as a result, there's so many like reintroductions of things we already know. So there's lots of stuff wrong with that I don't think is related to the tournament format. I think it's just a function of American television. You end up with the format where you've got like a bunch of sort of rounds and then quarterfinals and semi-finals and stuff. I don't know. I'm fine with that. I quite enjoy it. And then you see the same robot sort of like in a few episodes and stuff. I don't know. I think it's good.
I think in terms of ensuring a legitimate sporting competition, that is absolutely unequivocally the way to do it. Because that is how a lot of sports work. You go through a bracket. They have a sort of redemption system with the wild cards, which is there just to help for telly. I can understand why they want to do that. Fair enough. I think that does yield good results, even if it does allow Bombshell to come back, which I hated. Spoiler. For anyone that hasn't gone through it already, sucks to be you. I don't think it makes for good TV, though. And I especially don't think it would work on British TV.
Why not?
How many episodes of BattleBots were there last series?
This is true. How many? Well, this is complicated by the fact that obviously we don't get American TV broadcast over here.
And it was broadcast weird as well. But you're looking at maybe an 8 or 9 episode run, was it? something like that, vaguely.
I think it's sort of technically numbered as either 7 or 8, I think. But yeah, there's weirdness, at least in the things that I watch. There's weirdness around some episodes being combined and stuff like that. It is bizarre. But you're saying that as if it's a bad thing. I mean, this is in the UK we got 6 episodes.
Oh yeah, but take away the Americanness of the production. How many episodes? If we tried to maintain the 7 fights an episode we have right now, we wouldn't get any kind of series out of it at all.
No, you wouldn't. What was the format that was used in the older series of Robot Wars? Because I feel like that had a similar kind of seeding system and then like quarterfinals, semi-finals, finals type thing, which is a format that I quite like. How did they get around how do they deal with that?
I personally think the old episode format is a very good compromise between those two systems. Because what you had was a little tournament per episode. So 8 robots, there's a quarterfinal, a semi-final, a final, essentially. So it's all 1v1. Obviously, that was different in some series, but in the best series, it was a set of 1v1s, whittling 8 down to 1. They did either 8 or 16 of those, with all the finalists going through into whatever they went through into, depending on the numbers. That's a pretty good compromise, but it doesn't give us the advantage we have right now of seeing a lot of each robot.
I'm going to quote the speech at the beginning of this, which is, "There is no perfect design."
Oh dear.
I think
because now's the time to bring that up instead of our engineering chat.
I think I agree with you. I think there are advantages. I think there are advantages and disadvantages to all of these things, but I think the early series compromise is one I'd like to see again.
I personally would suggest something slightly more complicated that I think is slightly better.
Don't be clever. Go on, what is it?
So, one thing I should say, and this is a legitimate small spoiler for next series, the format is changing.
I didn't see that coming.
I have it written down here, how it works. I'm not going to go through it because I think that's just a little bit too spoilery.
We should cover it in our next episode.
Yeah, our spoilery episode.
Our spoiler cast.
Now, the thing that the new format does is that it guarantees every robot more than one fight. Every single robot that enters gets more than one fight. The disadvantage of it is it means there's only 6 robots per episode instead of 8, which means there's fewer episodes all told in the series.
Fewer episodes?
Sorry, same number of episodes, fewer robots.
Fewer robots. That makes sense, doesn't it? You've got to have fewer than 6, surely. It's not really a series at that point.
What I would do, and it's accepting having fewer competitors, which I'm not massively keen on, but I'll take it. I'd like to see 3 1v1s to start it up. Random draw, 1v1. Winners instantly go through to semi-finals. I would then put the 3 losers in a melee with the winner coming back in.
Okay.
So at this point, everyone's had their 2 fights.
Yep.
So if you get unlucky with a removable link or something like that in your first, you've got a chance to show what you're made of. If you do a Craig Danby and don't attach your flipper arm properly, you've got a chance to sort that out for next time.
Can I just correct you quickly? If you do a Craig Danby and build Foxic...
then you don't need the redemption thing because you're already going to win. Because it's your time now. And of course, from there, you've got 2 semi-finals, losers go out into a final. That, to me, gives everyone a reasonable amount of fights. It maintains the number of fights in an episode. And crucially, it minimises the amount of melees, because I think that melees are stupid. I really don't think that melees are the best way to get the best robots through. There's tactics going on to gang up. There's completely different sort of design decisions to be made for a multi-robot battle than a one-on-one. And if you optimise for one, you potentially weaken the other. And I'd rather see robots just optimise for a specific situation of a one-on-one and be the best at that they can be, which is something that BattleBots robots do very well.
Yeah, I wonder though if a 3-person melee is possibly the worst of all worlds.
Possibly, yeah. But I'm only doing one of them, so it's fine.
You'd
I
rather
have
have
halved
one.
the amount of meleeing.
You have, but you've replaced it with potentially worse melee than a 4-way melee.
Yeah, that's a reasonable criticism, absolutely. And as you say, there is no perfect design. So that and the fact that you've only got 6 instead of 8 are the downsides of what I would propose. It's also a bit stupidly complicated.
That's all right though. I think they should do an 8-person melee.
I think every episode should be an Annihilator, if you remember those.
Such fun.
So, out of the two you spoke about, either the BattleBot style bracket or the Old Rope War style bracket, which would you err towards?
I think of the two, I'd probably go towards old Robot Wars style, but given what you've just described, I think I quite like that as well. And, be nice to do new things rather than old things, maybe. I don't know. I guess my other biggest problem with it is the fact that it's recorded in a weekend. Or 3 days or whatever it is. Like, not long enough is the point. So I think to rehash production points that we've probably covered before, it'd be nice if robots didn't have to be gentle with each other, or if there wasn't a huge penalty if you weren't, and it'd be nice if the repair time was standardized. Like that is something, having learned that there's at least 2 hours as opposed to actually just 2 hours is annoying. I don't mind that it's 2 hours. I'm fine with it being short repair times if you're going to do it. Ideally, I'd like to see several days of repair time between fights for me, but if you're going to have short repair times and record it in a weekend, then you need to be specific about how long you've got to repair.
I'm not sure about your claim of recorded over a weekend. I know that the upcoming series was recorded over something nearer to a week, because there were midweek recordings for it. I think it was a Tuesday, a Wednesday, and a Thursday at least were recording days. So I think it is slightly longer than a weekend. I don't see how you would physically get it all done in a weekend.
I'm fairly certain, and I'm good chance I'm wrong, but I'm fairly certain that at least the first one was recorded possibly like a Friday to a Sunday or something silly like that.
Wasn't it possibly done? No, it wouldn't be done over a bank holiday week. Someone's going to correct us on this, for sure. Lots of people out there know how it was done, and they will tell us.
The specific days are less important. It's the fact that it's recorded over 3 days is my problem. I think it'd be nice if they just spread out a little bit more, give competitors a bit more time to sort things out and stuff. But
I agree in principle. I would love to see them film this over a fortnight. Film 1 day on, 1 day off, or something like that to give people loads of repair time. But these are people with real jobs and real lives.
Yeah.
They can't necessarily give up a couple of weeks to go to this recording. They're already, taking a financial hit to do it in the first place.
Yeah.
And obviously there's also... the BBC can take more of a financial hit by recording for longer, but it's the real people that are affected more by that. So as much as it sucks that there are short repair times, I think that is something that you just have to accept as a fact of what they're making. Which is why the format then needs to deal with that by not making people go up against people they've already fought. And not making broken robots fight by having a stupid round-robin system that looked really good as an idea to begin with and has not ended well.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I think given the constraints, I think you're right there that there's not much they can do other than record it across 3 days, but one can dream.
Well, the other option is pay all the contestants to be there. But that's very
true.
Blue sky.
Yeah, that seems very unlikely.
It may well be that we genuinely reach a point like America where most robots are sponsored.
Yeah.
I don't know if I think that couldn't happen on the BBC thinking about it because that's corporate interest.
Yeah, there'd be difficulties with that, if nothing else.
But it is plausible that at some point in future, whatever the biggest robot combat thing is in the UK, whether that's Robot Wars or something new that comes about, could go in that direction. We've got King of Bots starting out in China as well, which I know is slightly more big bucks than Robot Wars is. That is the way that the whole sport seems to try to move a lot of the time. But with what we've got to work with those constraints.
Ryan, why don't you tell us how people can get in touch with us?
First of all, we love getting the feedback through Reddit. Reddit is where we get a lot of our information, so it's really good to get more of it from there. Obviously, if we post this on the thread, feel free to send some comments there. We usually get back to you. We're pretty good with that. The other option is, of course, to tweet us. But if you're saying anything complicated, Twitter's awful. Just go to the Reddit. It's better. At Spinnerproof.
I'm also going to put out a call for people to go to iTunes and give this show a rating. It would really help other people find the show, and I'd love for more people to listen to it. Jellyfish, man. I mean, really? Is this necessary? I also note that the glue is not completely dry. It is a very good model, I have to say. It's a shame it's of such a rubbish robot. Next time I expect an immaculate scale model of Razor in that drawer. That's what I want. That's how you can top this rating. This is some thrilling podcasting. I was listening to a podcast earlier today called The Podcast Method because I want to get better at podcasting, and it's just Dan Benjamin talking, presumably by himself, which is really weird. It's funny how much harder it is to talk when you know there's no one on the other end. I'm just talking to myself, to an empty room that will only be heard by Ryan in the edit, thinking, what the is this guy doing? No one else will hear this. And yet here I am, talking anyway. I feel like my microphone technique has been terrible this entire episode. It's surprisingly hard. Like, so I'm used to recording with a headset microphone, like a really crap gaming headset thing, where no matter where I look, obviously the microphone is right next to my mouth, so it's fine. But with this one, I've got to like actually be speaking at the microphone. And whenever my voice sounds more like this, it's because I'm looking at my screen and not the microphone. It's a bad move. I need a screen that's right behind the mic, or a better mic stand thing. At the moment, I've got it like grappled onto a shelf so that it's not attached to my desk, which means I can tap the desk and it's not going to get picked up too much. Oh, I hear noises. Shh. He's coming back. Get back. Don't let him hear you.
I'm back.